Mr. Foss, you have conducted orchestras all over the land here, and I'm sure internationally. You have had your own orchestras, the Buffalo, for example, the Brooklyn Symphony. There is a feeling, I think, hereabouts, that the big orchestra, the symphony orchestra, is like a dinosaur and it's going to die in the next decade or two. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's something they've been saying for 20, 30 years or so,
So
and
we're still
it
waiting.
hasn't happened. I don't think so. I think it will survive. But we should take a little more adventurous approach to our programming, I think.
In what way? Do you mean adventuresome? You mean unknown works of the past or new works?
No. Not just play the war horses over and over again, but mix them with some things of the past that are interesting and some things of the present day that are interesting.
Uh-huh. What else do you think has to be done? The programming, yes, I completely agree with you. But what else has to be done to save our orchestras, if you will, of the world? Anything to do with the personnel, how they're treated, how the personnel of the orchestra perhaps can feel a little bit more with it, a little bit happier, or a little bit more self-fulfilled? Anything in that direction, you think?
I think that that varies. Some orchestras are very fulfilled now, and others are not. So it's true that there are difficult periods, but it varies. I think we'll pull through.
Mm-hmm. What orchestras do you enjoy conducting in particular?
Well, I was the music director of Buffalo, as you mentioned, in Milwaukee, which I enjoyed a lot, and Brooklyn.
Did they allow you in Milwaukee to do much contemporary music?
Well, what they usually do is they immediately, as I take over, start a festival of new music to prevent Mr. Foss from doing too much modern music on subscription. And I don't blame them. That's fine with me. And it works. It works.
And you had a program, I think, in terms of contemporary music where the audience and the performers and the composers themselves got together, I think, before the concerts. Where was that? It was something. Was it Brooklyn that you did that?
I think it was Buffalo.
Buffalo.
I'm not sure. Well, I've done it from time to time, but not regularly.
Uh-huh. How has that worked? Is it good? I mean, is it good to have the audience chatting with you, with the composer and the conductor?
Well, many orchestras do it nowadays, and I think it works, depending again on who the composer is, who the conductor is. It doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm. What about the early music movement? Now, you have been known, early music performance movement, with the going back to the original instruments, et cetera, et cetera. You have been known to perform yourself, because you are a pianist, of course, a very well-known pianist, the Brandenburg Concerto No. 5 of Bach, on a big grand piano with an orchestra.
And the D minor too, yes, of course, and the F minor.
So what about that? I mean, how come you don't play the forte piano? Learn
well, I
the
would
forte
love
piano.
to. There's not always a forte piano around.
Or a harpsichord.
I have done it on harpsichord, and I find I can bring out what I love in the music better on a piano. I think that we are tempted to put too much emphasis on the right instrument in terms of performance practice of that day, forgetting that our halls are much too big for a harpsichord. And once you have to amplify the harpsichord, you're no longer true to the practice of the day of that time. In other words, it just isn't that easy. I think the important thing is to get the spirit of the music. The instrument is of secondary importance. It's also important, but secondary importance.
But when you do the Bach concertos, the ones you have mentioned, on a big piano, you have dynamics, okay? And at that period, there were very, very few in the keyboard instruments, of course. There were none in the keyboard instruments. But do you play with the dynamics? Do you make big crescendos when you do Bach?
No, I don't. No,
what do you do?
I bring out what's wonderful about the music. And that's all that I'm occupied with. I don't have to take advantage of the possibilities of the piano that the harpsichord doesn't have. I just play the music so that I feel it's right. Too often nowadays we're too preoccupied with whether an ornament starts from the note above or below, as if that's going to reveal the music. Our priorities are not right today. We forget also that the practice of a time is based usually not on Bach or anything like that, but on mediocre music, on average music, of that time, how to make it a little more lively, namely lots of ornaments will make it more lively, will make it nicer. It's like food, you have gravy and pepper and salt, but don't do that with unique, great food. Do that only with average food. When you have Bach, you don't add ornaments. You don't need it and you don't do it because it just makes it sound like everything else instead of bringing out the uniqueness of it. I think we have to remember that when we do the classics, we must make them sound fresh and unique, as if the ink were not yet dry. That's much more important than practice of the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go back to some of your work, to your conducting and some of your studies. You worked at the Berkshire Music Center with Kusevitsky for several years.
Before that, I had conducting lessons with Fritz Reiner at the Curtis Institute.
Curtis, yes.
And then I was in that very first summer at Tankerwood.
The very first one?
Yes, 50 years ago. Or is it by now 51 or 52 years
ago?
Is
that a pleasant remembrance for you?
Oh, you bet. Those days were so exciting.
Were you there primarily as a conducting student or as a composer, or both?
Both. Kusevitsky said to me when I was auditioning, he said, well, look, you're so young, you're 17. Why don't you do composition with Hindemith this year and you'll study with me next year? My answer was, well, of course, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do. But I took so much trouble learning all these scores. Couldn't I do the audition even though I have nothing to expect? And so he let me do the audition. I conducted to Rollenspiegel, and then he said in his inimitable English, he said, if you want, you will have. And that meant that I could do both conducting with him and
you were only
composition
17.
with
Hindemith. You must have just come over from Paris and Berlin not too many years before.
Age 15, just barely 15, I arrived in New York, yes.
And you went right to Curtis and studied with Reiner. And you studied piano with Ven Gerova, very famous.
Right.
What was that like? Was that a great experience?
She was incredible. She really she made both Bernstein and me practice, because we knew that if we hadn't came to the lesson without having practiced, she would have a heart attack. So we had to practice.
Were you friends with Bernstein there at Curtis?
Oh, yes. Lenny and I became friends at Curtis.
And you're both with
friends ever since.
Did you play for each other? Did you play piano duets or two pianos or concertos?
We did everything. We did. Sometimes I would play and he would conduct. I would conduct. He would play, and we showed our sketches and new music to each other. He was like an older brother. He was wonderful.
He was 3 years older than you. Four. He was born in 1918. That's right.
4 years older.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, that must have been a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
How about Reiner? Was he as tough as people say that he was?
Very tough indeed, but he rather nice to me because I was so young. So I got away with murder. And he also gave me my first professional break, and so did Kusevitsky for that matter. I really was so lucky in those days to have those great teachers.
That was maybe just a little bit after Goldovsky worked there at Curtis. You wouldn't have known him there.
I met Goldovsky at Tankerwood.
No, but he had been at Curtis. He worked with Reiner too, I believe.
Yeah, that was earlier.
That was earlier.
Yes,
right.
He's older.
Okay. About your music now, what about some of your early pieces before you went to UCLA? And, for example, The Jumping Frog. How about pieces like that? Are you still happy with that music? And The Prairie, that famous piece?
Oh, yes, The Prairie is what made me, what took me out of anonymity, so to say, and made me a known entity. I wrote that. I began writing that when I was 19, finished it when I was 20, and then by the time I was 21, Robert Shaw had performed it with the Collegiate Chorale in New York. Then Rodzinski took it up. I still like that work a lot, yes. Mm-hmm. Because in that work, it was as if Carl Sandburg, the poet, whom I set to music, introduced me to my new adopted country, America. It was wonderful.
It's American, you think, in idiom, that piece?
Absolutely. And also, it's got some Aaron Copland influence in it, too, who was the first American music that I really appreciated. So,
who else did you appreciate? The composers that were very big at that time in this country.
Well, Hindemith was the first modern composer I appreciated. Unfortunately, by the time I studied with him in Tankerwood, I had just discovered Stravinsky. So I was a very rebellious student. He threw me out twice. He took me back. We became friends later on.
What didn't you like about his teaching? About
I was just a terribly rebellious student. I was no longer interested in his music. I just discovered Stravinsky. It was a very bad moment for me to. But he wrote to me in a letter. He said, "Look, a teacher's like a doctor. If you don't want to do what the doctor says, go to another doctor." He was right. He was absolutely right. But that's the way life is. The timing isn't always ideal. Mm-hmm. And he was a wonderful teacher, too.
And you just mentioned again Tanglewood. What were some of the things that you imbibed and learned from and were impressed by with Kusevitsky? What about that? In terms of your conducting,
his
now,
love
perhaps.
for music, the way he conveyed it, communicated it to the orchestra, the simplicity. He was very childlike, but he was full of missionary zeal, and that was a quality that Rainer did not manage to communicate so much. So between the two, I really got a lot out of it.
And in those days, Bernstein also was a student there. You were there
Absolutely.
together, right?
We were students, both of Rainer, of Vingerova, and of Kusevitsky. Yeah.
Did you have any rivalry going on there?
No,
with
because we were
Kusevitsky?
so different. We were so different, but I can give you a funny anecdote. Namely, once I went to the barber near Tanglewood in Lennox, and the barber said, "Oh, you're at Tanglewood, the great man. I cut his hair today." I said, "You mean he was in the barber shop?" No, I went up to Saranac and I cut his hair. I said, "Well, that's wonderful." Yes, and he told me he has two favorite pupils. One, he said, was Dionysian and the other Apollinian. I think that's rather amazing to hear a barber utter these two Greek words. And to this day, Lenny and I are wondering, well, maybe Lenny and I mean, he's not wondering right now, but we were wondering who is Dionysian and who is
And in
who is
retrospect,
Apollinian.
you still can't figure it out?
Oh, I think that he was the Dionysian one and I'm
Yes.
the Apollinian one.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
I think so. That would be my guess. Going back to that period, you were writing other pieces such as one that I have never heard, but I'm dying to hear it, Symphony of Chorales. And I point to the fact that you are sometimes eclectic, that you bring in music from the past around you into your own original works.
Well, we like to make things our own, we composers. Same thing is true of Stravinsky, who said so beautifully, "You must always steal, but never from yourself, because then you don't learn anything."
Oh, of course, the ballet based on Tchaikovsky, Le Baiser de la Fée.
Yeah.
Stravinsky.
So we all
and
do that.
Pulcinella.
The trick is to make things your own, because nothing comes from nowhere. Nothing comes into a blank mind. Everything comes from our love of music. So it always comes from somewhere, whether it's conscious or unconscious. But we must make it our own.
A piece that you did that with that brought you quite a bit of notoriety. I remember using it on my own program here many years ago. I think a couple of times is Baroque Variations. You're very well known for that.
Yeah, they're
Let's
Baroque
talk
nightmares.
about that. Let's part. Yes,
They're
the
nightmares,
dreams.
yeah.
The dreams. Tell us about that. What was your conception? And you used Bach, Handel, and Scarlatti.
And Handel.
The young Scarlatti.
Yeah, and
Handel.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell us about that.
Well, I wrote it with their notes, but transforming it, and it is like a nightmare. As a matter of fact, the idea for these variations came to me. I had a dream of Baroque notes washed ashore and then reclining again. And that's when I developed the concept of music going in and out of inaudibility, which is in a lot of my pieces, and particularly in Baroque variations.
You mean coming out of nowhere?
In other
sonically?
words, they play inaudibly and until called upon by the conductor to emerge. The conductor gives different cues in different directions, and the piece will vary at every performance because different things will be heard, different things will be juxtaposed, and so forth. Instead of starting and stopping, in and out of inaudibility is a different concept, and it was very stimulating to me. And Baroque Variations is full of that.
That's a very interesting idea. Instead of stopping and starting, you just wanted to all of a sudden to appear.
That's right. I remember the review I got for Baroque Variations in the New Yorker. It was very funny because obviously the critic hated it because he said what Mr. Foss had done to Bach is pretty much what Duchamp did to the Mona Lisa when he painted
With the mustache.
a mustache on it. Subsequently, Duchamp gave up art for chess, and if Mr. Foss would do likewise, the whole cause of modern music would benefit. And I was delighted with that review. Other people have to work hard to benefit the cause of music, and I could just give up and benefit the cause of music. So when the record came out, I insisted that this review would be reprinted on the record jack. The company thought I'd gone berserk or I was joking. No, I said, I mean it. Let's have this on the record jack.
Reminds me a little bit of the collection of Slonimsky, the adverse reviews that he has collected. That would be a beauty of
Dictionary of Invective.
Yes, right.
Yes. Yeah.
The Groves, American Groves, says this about you. See if you agree. Generally about your character as a composer, they say, quote, that you have filled with enthusiasm, with curiosity, and receptivity to all ideas. Is that fair, you think, about you?
I wished it were true, because I think there are lots of ideas that are probably not open to me, because everybody is limited. But I think endless curiosity is certainly part of my makeup as a composer. I have that. Some people don't have any such curiosity. Take people who are more single-minded, like Nan Caro, and do one little thing all their life to perfection. Well, that's too primitive for me. I subscribe more the idea of, well, like Mozart was saying, I can write in any style I want to, the Alberti bass, or the sacred style, or the learned style, or Rococo. You see, of course, he used the word style. He should have used technique, because style is basically personality. When I say make it your own, I mean that. I mean, bring it into your style. But use all these techniques is important. I cannot understand composers who sit on the 12-tone system and say, I'm a 12-tone composer. It's like Bach saying, I'm a fugue composer. What's wrong with writing something else? I mean, how you want a richer vocabulary than that. Or I am an aleatory composer, or I'm a minimal composer. You got to use all those techniques and make it your own.
Very interesting. In that sense, that it does remind us, I think, of Stravinsky, who also experimented in directions and constantly turned corners.
Exactly.
And maybe that's why you felt so comfortable with your discovery of Stravinsky when you were to study with Hindemith.
Well, Stravinsky is the great composer of the 20th century.
What about his turn right after the 50s, after the Rake's progress into serial writing? What about that? Talk about that a little bit. That was a big turn.
He made that his own too, with the 12 tones. It's still, the fun is to turn it into Stravinsky, and he did exactly that.
And you have dabbled, at least, right, with serial writing yourself?
I would never call it dabble, because I think amateurs dabble. We're too serious for that. We want to go deeply into something.
Did you go deeply into serial writing?
Yeah, but not at all in a way that Schoenberg would approve of. I would do crazy things like obtain via permutations all kinds of rows and pin them up on the wall like wallpaper, and then go around like a paint and say, I like this, I like that, I like that, and then use it and change it around and make my own choices, and nobody can discover the row anymore. The row is like a scaffold that is discarded. It helped to get me ideas, to furnish me with surprises that I could work with, and then I discard it because I'm not interested in the unity principle, which was so important to a student of Schoenberg's like Webern. The unity idea doesn't bother me, doesn't concern me much. But
these are, you said, and to quote you again, these are raw materials.
Right, raw materials.
Grist for your mill.
That's right. That's how I used it now. I don't know if anybody else uses it like that, but that's the way I use it.
What about some of your recent enthusiasms? What are you working on right now? You are composing.
I'm trying to write a left-hand piano concerto commissioned by the Boston Symphony for Leon Fleischer.
How is it coming? Are we going to hear it?
Well, when I finally like what I'm doing, but I've been throwing out more music than I've been retaining. But I just had a symphony premiered, my number 3, in Chicago. That was commissioned by the Chicago Symphony for their 100th anniversary.
And the critics?
And the Zubin Mehta conducted it very well. And I think, well, the important thing is, did I like it? How did
Not so
my
much the
critical
critics.
review? My review of it was that I think it's okay.
Oh.
I think it's okay. It's a big piece in 4 movements, and it's called Symphony of Sorrows.
Oh. Let's go back to your left-hand concerto, however. How is that developing? How are you going to do it? Movements?
I'm having a very hard time.
What, have you got anything done yet? Any movements?
Yeah, a little bit. No, I can't really talk about embryos.
So
it's an embryo.
Is it hard because it's the left hand alone? Because you don't have enough scope or something?
Well, because a left hand it's like writing for half an instrument. It's since I love the piano, I only get half of the piano. So it's difficult. It's confusing.
Any other works that you're planning?
Works I'm planning?
Yeah. Anything down the line that we can look forward to?
Yes, I'm writing a Sanctus. They have received a commission, and it's rather amusing. Remember, the Verdi Requiem was originally just the last movement, and other Italian composers were asked to write other movements.
Yes.
Well, now they're commissioning a Requiem, and they're asking one composer from each country. And they chose me for America. And
who are your colleagues?
I think they asked Messiaen and Berio, and I don't know who accepted and who didn't accept. But anyway, I'm in good company. And this is for a premiere in Assisi end of this year.
Oh.
So that's another thing that I'm doing.
Have you started that?
Is the Sanctus, not really.
Even thinking?
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about it. And there are other things that I have to somehow get into.
What about piano? Do you write any more for the piano solo? You did a lot of that with your very first published pieces, I think, were
I never did a
inventions.
lot. I never did a lot, but I wrote rather sparingly. Being a pianist, I must say I've written surprisingly little for piano. The last piece is already by now 8 years ago or 9 years ago, and that is called Solo. And it also exists another version called Solo Observed. That has 4 other instruments joining the solo.
You have worked, you have really gambled about. You have been everywhere. With your curiosity, you have used electronic instruments, haven't you?
No.
Not at all? There was
Well,
cello. There was a cello piece I read about.
Oh, yes. In that cello piece, all I did is ask the cellist to pre-record a Bach saraband and then play against
So it was a duet with tape.
Yeah, I have never been an electronic composer.
What do you think about it? I mean, what are you
It's
feeling?
fine if you have a talent and real knowledge, but exactly, I don't like to dabble. And at my age, even 10 or 20 years ago, it would have been dabbling. There are others who really grew up with it and are really qualified. So when I did something electronic, it was a collaboration with an electronic composer, Joel Chatterby. That was long ago. Well, maybe just about my life in general, what I'm doing these days besides composing. I don't know.
All right. Okay.
I don't know. I can't think.
Okay. So you have some commissions, and you're thinking about a piano. You're having a devil of a time with a left-hand concerto with a piano for Fleischer. What else are you doing? Are you still conducting? Are you giving
all the
lectures?
time.
Are you teaching? What? Tell
I'm
us about it.
teaching at BU, for instance, on Mondays and sometimes Tuesdays, but I'm also conducting all the time, somewhere or other. In fact, I sometimes feel I live in airports. See, the trouble is when you have two jobs in life, like conducting and composing, you don't have time to live. And
Like Mahler, huh?
That's my predicament, yeah. That's my predicament. I try to do both full-time, composing and conducting. I've just come back from Holland, where I was conducting in Rotterdam. In fact, I did the European premiere of Gunther Schuler's second violin concerto just now.
Well, why don't you give up? Why don't you give up conducting so that you can do more composition and have a little time for yourself? I mean, that will be the more permanent legacy that you will leave. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, well, first of all, the conductor keeps the composer and his family alive.
Okay, that's a good
That's
reason.
one reason, right? And then I must say, it's difficult to give something up when you've worked so many years to get good at it. You see, conductors, I mean, there are some so-called prodigy conductors, but they really aren't prodigies, just like there are no prodigy child executives, you know? I mean, it's a profession where you have to become a father figure. You must have lived in order to do it right. So I would say after 20, 30 years, you really become a good conductor. And then at that point, give it up. That's kind of cruel. You don't want to do that.
Yes.
So now that I feel that I'm really good at it, I hate the idea of giving it up.
Do you think that's the way Bernstein felt? Because he did
well
many things.
Could well be that that's the way he felt. We never really discussed the idea of giving up conducting and why not give it up. So I don't really know, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had a similar reaction.
Do you think that in terms of Bernstein, where do you think his greatest strengths were? As a composer,
Well,
as a conductor, as a pianist?
Well, a pianist definitely took a second row in his life, but he was a fabulous conductor and a fabulous composer. I would say works precisely like West Side Story are among the most serious that he's done. We have a wrong idea of what's serious very often. We think when something is Broadway, it can't be serious. But actually, there's so much passion in that work, more so than maybe in some other work that is not at all jazzy or, that is serious with a capital S. But I think that he is, in some of his works, like the jazz movement from the Age of Anxiety is absolutely fabulous. So it's very hard to say which area is more important. I think that his gift showed in both areas, conducting as well as composing, maximum.
Mm-hmm. I remember playing last year. We did a Bernstein concert at the university, Northeastern University, and I played a little anniversary that was for you.
That's right.
I should have brought it today to play it for you, but and it's cast as a little canon, I think, and where the left hand leads the right, I think, in octaves, and then it reverses completely. And I was wondering if he thought maybe you were Apollonian, so that he would write a canon and say that it was you, it was your anniversary. Do you like that little piece that he wrote for you?
I love it. It's a very nice piece. I'm lucky to have Samuel Yeleni write a little piece for me. Also, Aaron Copland is one of the Emily Dickinson songs is dedicated to me.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So,
did Virgil Thompson ever do a portrait of you?
No, he didn't.
He did a lot of them.
He did portraits of me in writing, yes, in reviews, yes. Some glowing and some the opposite, yes.